Module 2, Building Background Knowledge. What are animal defense mechanisms? Unit 1, Lesson 2. Big question, what are animal defense mechanisms? The word defense means to protect yourself or keep something or someone from getting hurt. The word mechanism means a natural reaction in response to something. So a defense mechanism means how animals react to protect themselves from harm. Guiding questions. How do animals' bodies and behaviors help them survive? How can a writer use knowledge from their research to inform and entertain? Learning targets. I can explain what it means to be a researcher. I can paraphrase information presented in a read-aloud on animal defense mechanisms. I can infer about a text by examining the visuals. And for the last learning target, I can infer about a text by examining its visuals. The word visual is something that you can see, like a picture or a drawing. As a review, in part 1 of lesson 2, we read aloud a part of the book Venom, and we filled out our chart for pages 16 and 17 with examples of how bees protect themselves and how this helps bees survive. Tomorrow in lesson 3, you'll be reading about wasps and how they protect themselves and survive, so that's something to look forward to. Before we get started with our next activity, it's important to remember what good readers do. They read small chunks of text slowly and think about the gist. They reread each passage one sentence at a time. Underline things you do not understand or know about. Circle or underline words that you do not know. Talk with your partners about all of your good ideas. State the gist or message of the paragraph in the margin. Listen to the questions. Go back to the text to find answers to questions, and talk with your partners about the answers you find. These are good things that readers do, and it's important that you work on doing these things when you're reading. Today, you begin your research on animal defense mechanisms. You'll be reading this article titled Award-Winning Survival Skills: How Animals Elude Predators. You will need your Animal Defenses Research Journal or your purple workbook. Open up to find the page that you see on the screen and wait to hear the directions. Directions. Look at the visual on page 2 of Award-Winning Survival Skills: How Animals Elude Prey. In the first column of the graphic organizer below, record 3 details you see in the visual. In the second column of the graphic organizer, record the inferences you make based on these details. Note, and this is very important, do not complete the right-hand column of the graphic organizer yet. We do not do that until after we read the article. Now we're going to look at page 2, and it's titled Best Impersonator, the Mimic Octopus. So we're going to take a look at the pictures of the mimic octopus that the author has provided, and we're going to read the captions a little bit closer. And then we're going to fill in information in our chart. Just the first 2 columns. We'll leave the 3rd column for when we read the actual article a little bit closer. The directions say to look at the visuals, and that means the pictures. So I see a picture of what I'm assuming is the mimic octopus. I'm assuming that is underwater, so I'm going to put that in the first column, underwater. I know that it's called the mimic octopus, so I'm going to put that in my chart as well. And then I'm going to get a little bit more detailed with what I actually see. So in that bigger picture of the mimic octopus, I see that it has some stripes, and then there's like some orangish red color stripes, and in the other picture it has kind of bulgy eyes and tentacles. So I'm going to include that information in the first column. So explicit information from the visual or the picture. That's all I'm going to put in that first column. Now I want to read the captions a little bit closer. The first caption says, prize fact. It looks like the quick change artist, talking about the Mimic Octopus, it looks like the quick change artist can mimic an exotic blanny species with bulging eye sockets and tentacles. So that is some information, and it supports what I've already seen in the visual, which is that it has bulgy eyes and tentacles. Excellent. The next caption says, prize fact. The Mimic Octopus contorts its body and dresses in bright stripes to impersonate the poisonous lionfish, which is the inside. That little picture in the circle is the picture of the actual poisonous lionfish. So the Mimic Octopus is making itself look like the lionfish, and that's going to help me infer some information to put in my next column. Now I'm going to think about what I can infer about the Mimic Octopus based on the visuals or the pictures and the captions which I read to help me understand about what was going on in the pictures. So I know that to infer means to take information from the text and combine it with information that I already have, my own background knowledge, and I come up with a new answer from my brain. And so what I know from the text, I've put in that first column. It lives underwater. It's called the Mimic Octopus. It has sometimes orangish red stripes. Sometimes it has bulgy eyes and tentacles. So because it seems like it can change what it looks like, I'm going to make an inference about that. So I'm going to say that the Mimic Octopus can change its appearance. It can look like a lionfish, like it shows in the picture, or another animal with bulgy eyes and tentacles, like in the second picture. This ability might help keep them safe because an animal might think they're more dangerous than they really are. And the reason I say that, the evidence I have of that, is in that one caption it says that they impersonate a poisonous lionfish. And so if one animal is poisonous, okay, it might be smart for them to look like that fish because maybe they're not poisonous but this other one is. So I think that's the inference I'm going to make, and that's what I'm going to write in the second column. Please copy down this information on your own paper, and I'll give you some time to do that. You can always pause the video if you need more time. Now we're going to take a look at some of the other visuals that are in the article. And while I'm showing them up here, you can be looking at them in your purple workbook. I'm going to describe each one of them, and I want you to think why the author included so many visuals in the article. The first picture shows something called a three-banded armadillo on the cover of a magazine called Science World. I want you to take a look at that visual, take a look at the shape that armadillo makes, and start making some inferences or thinking about what that might mean. Then I see another picture of the three-banded armadillo, and the caption says, "Three-banded armadillos sport supreme design. They use hinged bands to roll themselves up into a ball." So I'm thinking to myself, boy, I wonder how that helps this animal and why it might roll up into a ball. Hopefully you're thinking about that too. Then the author includes a picture of an opossum, and the caption says, "Prize fact. Is there a starring role in a Die Hard sequel for the pesky possum? It also boasts a rare natural resistance to snake bite venom." Now, in the picture, it kind of looks like that possum is dead. But I wonder if that might be just one of its defense mechanisms. I'm wondering that as I look at that picture. Hopefully you're thinking that too. The next visual I see is a sort of round, spiky looking animal. And the caption says, "When this pufferfish inflates in self-defense, its skin projects razor-sharp spines that cover the body, making it look pretty unappetizing." And I see in the smaller picture what it looks like before it's all blown up. So that's really interesting. Okay, I'm looking at those visuals and I'm wondering more information about that animal. And finally, I see a picture of the tortoise beetle. And the caption says, "The tortoise beetle may host nature's most outrageous defense. While most larvae leave excrement," that's poop, "when they leave excrement lying around, the tortoise beetle uses it to create a protective shield." That is very strange. So basically it uses its poop to create a shield with which to protect itself. That is very interesting. So again, I wonder why the author included so many visuals in the article. Well, I think it helps us visualize and understand what's going on in the text when we have so many pictures to look at. Sometimes it's hard to imagine what these animals look like if we didn't have pictures. So I think the author chose to include lots of pictures to help us better understand the text. Now you'll be listening as I read each section of this article out loud. At the end of each section, we'll stop and we'll talk about the gist of each section. Introduction. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there, not to mention a snake-eat-lizard world. To survive and reproduce, every creature must avoid becoming another predator's meal. But how to elude a hungry hunter who's bigger or faster than you? Animals use some positively award-worthy strategies called defenses. An animal's defenses are all that stand between being alive and being eaten, says biologist Tom Tregenza at the University of Leeds in the UK. The newly discovered Mimic Octopus, for example, fools marauders, or other animals, by impersonating an entire cast of less tempting prey. The flexible three-banded armadillo rolls itself up into a ball as impenetrable as an armored truck. How did such an audacious array of animal defenses evolve in the first place? In any large population, there will be some variation, says biologist Ralph Turnagain at the Florida Institute of Technology. Members of a species develop slightly different traits or physical characteristics. One armadillo might possess more flexible armor than another, and if an individual is lucky enough to possess a trait that saves it from being devoured or eaten, the animal may live long enough to reproduce and pass the trait on to its offspring. Eventually, that trait, or physical characteristic, will become dominant in future generations, Turnagain says. The theory is called natural selection. In a nutshell, life forms best suited to their environment survive over the long haul. To learn more about some of nature's award-winning defenses, read on. Now it's time to think about the gist. Remember that when you are figuring out the gist, you ask yourself who or what is the text about and what do we learn about it. Because what we just read was the introduction, you'll notice that they talk about a couple of the different animals that you'll be learning about in the rest of the article. They're animals that we saw in the visuals that we looked at. Things like the Mimic Octopus or the armadillo. And so when we ask who or what is the text about, in this case, we're not going to say just one animal. We're going to say it's about different animals. And what do we learn from this section? It's that different animals have different defenses that help them survive. And so based on that gist, I can tell what the rest of the article is going to be about. Pause the video now to write down this gist statement in your article. You can write it in the margins of the paper. Best special effect, the Three-Banded Armadillo. Note to Hollywood special effects creators: if you need to devise ingenious strategies for heroes to protect themselves against bloodthirsty attackers, take inspiration from the Three-Banded Armadillos. While all armadillos sport leathery armored shells to fend off prey like ravenous wildcats, Three-Banded Armadillos are the only ones that curl themselves into completely enclosed balls, says Southwest Missouri State University biology professor Lynn Robbins. The Three-Banded Armadillo and Southern Three-Banded Armadillo live in South America. Their body shields consist of bony plates and a layer of horn or keratin, fibrous proteins that make up tissues such as hair and nails. The plates themselves are formed by ossified or hardened skin. On their shells, 3 hinged bands give them the flexibility to roll themselves up. Since the shoulder and haunch plates aren't attached on the sides to the armadillo's skin, there's plenty of room inside to fit a head, legs, and tail. The shells are also good insulators. They trap heat to keep the creature active in winter. When threatened, armadillos curl up and leave only a tiny peephole from which to peer out at their predator. If touched, they snap totally shut. However, some fierce jaguars have been known to use their savage teeth and claws to crack open a tasty armadillo. Even the most dazzling special effects have their limits. Now it's time to think about the gist. Remember that when you are figuring out the gist, you ask yourself who or what is the text about, and what do we learn about it? So who or what is this text about? It's about the Three-Banded Armadillo. And what do we learn about this armadillo? Well, we learn some ways that it has to defend itself. When it's threatened, it curls up into a ball, and its hard shell helps to protect itself. And so that's what we learn, and that's the gist that we will jot down. Who or what is the text about? The Three-Banded Armadillo, and we learn that they can curl up into a ball, and their armor or those bony plates help protect themselves. Pause the video now to write down this gist statement in your article. You can write it in the margins of the paper. Best impersonator, the Mimic Octopus. Do you know an undiscovered superstar, a natural talent who can mimic others on demand? For years, divers in murky waters off Indonesia snapped photos of an octopus, an 8-armed invertebrate, which means it has no backbone, that seemed to impersonate a cast of marine animals through mimicry or looking like another species. When a group of scientists got hold of the images, they hightailed it to Indonesia last year to identify the extraordinary 60-centimeter or 24-inch long copycat, which they dubbed the Mimic Octopus. Many animals mimic other creatures to turn off predators. The harmless milk snake, for example, resembles the poisonous coral snake with its bright red, yellow, and black bands. But this octopus is the only animal we've found so far that can mimic more than one animal, says biologist Tom Tregenza at the University of Leeds. The octopus can ape at least 3 critters: the flatfish, the lionfish, and a sea snake, Tregenza's team claims. To mimic the flatfish, the lumpy octopus speeds up, yanks in all 8 arms, alters shape and color, and ripples its body in a wave. Why imitate a slew of creatures? One clue. While many octopuses live and hide in reefs or rocks, the mimic octopus slinks along sea floor mud in plain sight. There's nowhere to hide, Tregenza says. Besides, adds team scientist Roger Hanlon, an octopus is a soft, juicy hunk of protein that everything else out there wants to eat. Flatfish are far more populous and less likely to attract attention. How does this superstar perform its tricks? It features a flexible body that twists into multiple forms and skin cells called chromatophores, which contain various colored pigments. Muscles around each chromatophore constrict or expand the cell. When constricted, skin color lightens. When expanded, color darkens. The octopus alters color patterns by constricting and expanding thousands of chromatophores at the same time. Next stop, Warner Brothers? Now it's time to think about the gist. Remember that when you are figuring out the gist, you ask yourself who or what is the text about, and what do we learn about it? So who or what is this text about? It's about the Mimic Octopus. What do we learn about the Mimic Octopus? Well, we learn that the Mimic Octopus is able to change its shape and imitate at least 3 different types of animals. That's very interesting, and that's what we're going to write down as our gist. Pause the video now to write down this gist statement in your article. You can write it in the margins of the paper. Best actor in a death scene, the opossum. Ever watch an actor croak only to catch him breathing afterward? He should take lessons from the opossum, America's only marsupial, which is a mammal that carries its young in a pouch. Many predators won't touch carrion or dead animals. When threatened by wild dogs or coyotes, the slow-running opossum either heads for the nearest tree to climb or else plays possum, feigns death. It falls over, lies still on its side, eyes and mouth half open. Drool trickles from its mouth, its tongue lolling to one side. Most persuasive of all, it expels a green, putrid-smelling substance from its anal glands. Basically, it makes a big, stinking mess, says University of Ohio biology professor Stephen Ostad. The opossum can remain in this state long enough for any predator to exit the scene. Now that's an Oscar-winning performance. Now it's time to think about the gist. Remember that when you are figuring out the gist, you ask yourself who or what is the text about, and what do we learn about it? So who or what is this text about? It's about the opossum. And what do we learn that the opossum does? Well, we learn that the opossum plays dead, and this is one way that it tries to protect itself from getting eaten. So our gist statement is the opossum pretends to be dead in order to survive. Pause the video now to write down this gist statement in your article. You can write it in the margins of the paper. Best action hero, the Spiny Pufferfish. Ordinarily, the meek spiny pufferfish drifts slowly in its native coral reef habitats around the world. Its round body and small fins make it a sluggish swimmer and perfect prey. But just try to eat it and get ready to be blown away. When threatened, the puffer inflates to 3 times its normal size. It just swallows water until its stomach is completely full, says biologist and pufferfish expert Ralph Turnagain at the Florida Institute of Technology. How does the fish change shape? Its skin and stomach are super stretchable. Also, it lacks a rib cage, no bones to impede an expanding stomach. Dare to swallow an uninflated puffer? Sharks have actually died from a pufferfish inflating in their esophagus, says Turnagain. Other predators who've witnessed Superman in action stay clear of the big puffer. Now it's time to think about the gist. Remember that when you are figuring out the gist, you ask yourself who or what is the text about, and what do we learn about it? So who or what is this section about? Well, it's about the pufferfish. And what do we learn about the pufferfish? Well, we learn that the pufferfish has the ability to blow itself up, and that is one way it helps itself survive. So that's what we're going to write for our gist statement. Pause the video now to write down this gist statement in your article. You can write it in the margins of the paper. Most outrageous performance, the Tortoise Beetle. Do you cheer for revolting on-screen characters? The larva, or immature form, of the tortoise beetle species may nab the Oscar for nature's most disgusting defense maker. The palm tree dwelling bugs, which live in Florida and southern Georgia, cover themselves with an elaborately woven thatch of their own feces. They extrude strands of feces from an anal turret, which swivels to shoot out the strands in all directions. The feces are dry, odorless, and chemically inert or inactive. Still, most predators won't go near the stuff. People react with yuck, and my guess is so do predators, says expert Thomas Eisner, a Cornell University ecologist or scientist that studies the environment. There's a rule in nature: you don't mess with feces because it can carry parasites and microbial diseases. Unfortunately, no protection works 100% of the time. If you look hard enough at the defense of any animal, somebody manages to crash through it, Eisner says. The adult carbide beetle chomps right through the fecal shield to reach tempting larvae underneath. If an animal like the tortoise beetle is rejected by a lot of predators, it's an incredibly desirable resource to a hunter because no one else is competing to eat the animal, says Eisner. If you can crash through its defense, as the carbide beetle does, you've got it made. Now it's time to think about the gist. Remember that when you are figuring out the gist, you ask yourself who or what is the text about, and what do we learn about it? So now you're thinking, who or what is this text about? Well, it's about the tortoise beetle. And what do we learn about the tortoise beetle? Well, we learned that it actually makes a shield of its own feces, which is another name for poop. So it makes a poop shield to help protect itself from predators. Pause the video now to write down this gist statement in your article. You can write it in the margins of the paper. Now it's time to think about the gist of the whole text. Remember to ask yourself who or what was the text about, and what did we learn about it or them. In this case, we learned about a lot of different animals, and we learned how it is that they defend themselves. There were lots of different mechanisms that they had, and so our gist statement is going to be different animals and how they defend themselves. That's general enough to cover all the information in the whole text. I want you to go back to the Kwl chart that you started in Lesson 1. You started putting information in that first column the K, which is what you know or think you know. It's your prior knowledge about the topic. You might have asked some questions, what you want to know. Well, today you can start writing some information that you learned. We read that whole article, and I want you to put in these boxes, you're going to answer the question, were any of your questions answered in the text that you read today? What new information did you learn from this article? So make sure you put the information in one box, and then your source would be the name of the article. And you could call this one award-winning survival skills. You can kind of shorten it to be award-winning survival skills. That would be your source. But go ahead and take some time to do this on your own. Any information that you learned, and remember this is the first day where you're really starting to gather that information. You're becoming researchers. Great job today. End of lesson 2.